Rain drifted down in a thin, steady mist, softening the edges of the Chicago skyline and leaving the sidewalks slick with reflections of amber street lamps. Outside the Gilded Oak, a restaurant known for its polished wood, velvet booze, and a wine list that could shame entire cellars, a man paused beneath the awning. His coat, once brown, had been rubbed pale at the elbows and seams, the sort of garment found on discount racks or forgotten in the back of a closet. It hung loose around his shoulders, its weight familiar but unimpressive, exactly the kind of coat no maitre d' would admire. Nathan Cole tugged it closer, letting the collar shield his neck as he drew in a quiet breath. Nathan was a figure who lived above rain-slick streets and flickering lights. He commanded skylines and investments. His fortune counted not in millions, but in billions. Yet, standing there, he was just another solitary man, deciding whether to step inside a place far grander than his appearance suggested. This ritual had become his only form of honesty. In the disguise of a stranger, he could test the world without the armor of reputation. For years he had done this, entering restaurants or hotels his own company owned, looking for truth hidden behind the varnish of customer service reports and glossy brochures. And always, beneath it, pulsed the same ache of solitude. Inside, the restaurant glowed with a golden warmth that contrasted sharply with the damp chill outdoors. A fire crackled at the far end, its light dancing off crystal glasses and polished cutlery. Guests murmured in refined tones, laughter rising and falling like soft music between courses. Nathan wiped a bead of water from his glasses, cheap frames with thick lenses that distorted his gaze, and pushed through the heavy doors. The hostess, looked up, her practiced smile faltering the instant her eyes swept over his faded coat and worn shoes. Her tone carried the faint edge of dismissal. "Can I help you?" "A table for one," Nathan replied, his voice quieter than it was in boardrooms, a voice without command. Her brows twitched before she glanced at her reservation list. "We're very full tonight." The words slid out with a politeness that almost hid their bite. Almost. After a beat, she sighed, tapping the tablet in her hand with exaggerated patience. "I can seat you near the kitchen. It's all we have." "That will do," Nathan said, offering nothing more. He followed her through the dining room, aware of the sidelong glances from guests in tailored suits and glittering jewelry. Their eyes lingered on his coat, the tired fabric out of place among silks and pressed collars. It was the same look he had seen all his life, before success, before glass towers bore his name. The hostess stopped at a small table tucked near the swinging doors of the kitchen. The air here carried the clang of pans, and the smell of garlic and butter rushed out in bursts whenever the doors flapped. A wobble in one leg of the table made the water glass tremble when she set it down. She gestured stiffly, as though depositing him where he belonged. "Here you are." Nathan sat without protest, his hands folding loosely in front of him. From this corner, he could watch without being watched. He saw waiters adjust their brightness depending on the cut of a guest's suit, noted how managers drifted to tables where wine bottles cost more than rent. The stagecraft was flawless, the deference calibrated, but beneath the sheen, Nathan detected the cracks he always came searching for. He leaned back, letting the chatter wash over him, feeling both hidden and exposed. The weight of his fortune, his name, his empire. It all seemed distant here. He was invisible. A man in a faded coat surrounded by a theater of wealth. That invisibility hurt and comforted him at once. The sting of being dismissed reminded him of everything he had overcome, yet the relief of anonymity gave him a strange kind of peace. Minutes passed. A busboy hurried by, nearly spilling a tray, only to receive a sharp glare from a manager prowling the floor. No one paid attention to the man at table 12, which was exactly as Nathan wanted. He sipped from the plain glass of water before him, listening to the muffled rhythm of knives striking plates, the laughter from tables draped in fine linen. For a moment, he allowed himself to wonder, was this what his empire had created? polished smiles hiding quiet disdain. He had built wealth enough to last lifetimes. But in rooms like this, stripped of title, he was just another man to be judged and dismissed. That truth weighed heavier than any balance sheet. The kitchen doors burst open again, releasing a rush of steam and the sharp scent of seared steak. Through the haze stepped a young woman balancing a tray too heavy for her narrow shoulders. Her hair was pulled back neatly, though a strand had escaped to brush her cheek. Her steps were steady but tired, and the faint tremor in her hands betrayed long hours and little rest. She approached Nathan's table with care, her eyes shadowed but steady. When their gazes met, something shifted. It was not recognition, she did not know who he was. It was something more fragile, the brief flicker of a person who saw another, not as a suit or a status symbol, but simply as someone sitting alone on a rainy evening. Nathan adjusted his glasses, his breath caught in the hush between them. For the first time that night, the role of a silent observer no longer felt so solitary. The weary waitress, Lily Hart, stopped at his table, tray in hand, ready to begin a connection neither of them yet understood. Lily set the bread basket on the wobbling table, the linen still warm against her palms. A fine tremor moved through her fingers, more from the day's long hours than from the weight of wheat rolls and butter curls. "Good evening, sir," she said, steadying the basket with a folded napkin. Her voice was careful, respectful, the tone of someone who understood how much grace can matter when tips pay for groceries and medicine. A gust of heat and the perfume of garlic drifted out each time the kitchen doors swung wide. Behind them came the bright clatter of pans, the scrape of metal against grill, the clipped "yes, chef" cadence that keeps a room like this humming. Lily stepped back half a pace so the table's leg wouldn't jostle her, and Nathan saw the shoes she wore. Black non-slips, with the finish rubbed dull and the seams faintly cracked near the toes. Her uniform fit neatly, but had been laundered thin. The apron strings were frayed where diligent hands tied them tight every shift. He murmured a thank you. The word felt oddly small in his mouth, and it took him to another place. A diner in Ohio where the coffee was strong enough to peel paint, and the breakfast rush could turn a boy's arms to rope. He remembered the smell of bacon fat that never quite left his jacket, the sting of a manager's sigh when he fumbled a plate, the way older regulars tapped coins on the counter for a refill. That life had taught him to wipe the rim of a cup before setting it down, to meet a guest's eyes, to mean the words, "I appreciate you." Looking at Lily, he recognized the rhythm of hours that start before daylight and stretch past the last bus home. "Would you care for sparkling or still water, sir?" she asked, and the "sir" wasn't an act, it was habit, a hinge on which her whole evening turned smoothly. "Still is fine," Nathan said. The coat around his shoulders looked even shabbier beneath the restaurant's gold light, but Lily's posture did not alter. She neither rushed nor hovered. She noticed the table's wobble, slid a folded coaster beneath the short leg, tested it with a gentle press, and offered a small nod of satisfaction when the glass stopped quivering. He watched the tiny rituals that separate service from servitude, the way she refolded the bread cloth so the heat would linger, the way she turned the butter dish so the stamped oak leaf faced him. When she poured water, she did not angle the bottle to flaunt a label. She aimed for silence, a pour that wouldn't interrupt a thought. "The soup today is tomato basil," she said. "The kitchen roasts the tomatoes low so it keeps a little sweetness." She smiled once, quickly, not a salesman's grin, but an ordinary kindness. Said again, and her shoulders eased as if the word had landed gently. At the next table, a couple in evening wear argued softly about a Cabernet. A manager ghosted by, shoulders squared, eyes scanning for status, pausing near the table where cameras clicked over a tomahawk steak, gliding past the one where a coat looked a little too tired. Lily's attention did not flicker. She asked if Nathan wanted more time with the menu, and when he nodded, she folded her hands at waist height, listening with a patience that made space for dignity. From the kitchen a bell rang twice. Lily glanced over her shoulder at the pass, then back at Nathan. The light caught the faint circles under her eyes. Somewhere beyond this room, past the polished wood and hushed conversations, she pictured a small apartment where a boy's cough sometimes broke the silence between commercials. The thought came like a tide, the way it always did. Ethan's medicine schedule taped to the fridge, the neighbor's spare key tucked in a clay bowl, the blue inhaler laid out before bedtime. She reminded herself to text Mrs. Miller at break. Just a quick, "How's he doing?" Then set the thought gently down. There was a guest to serve. There was always a guest. "What would you recommend if I wanted something simple?" Nathan asked. "The roast chicken," she said without hesitation. "They do it with lemon and herbs. It doesn't try to impress you. It just turns out right." She seemed to realize she'd said more than the script and flushed. "Or the steak, if you're in the mood for it. The kitchen is very proud of the crust." He almost smiled. "I like things that turn out right." Windshield. "Because give you another minute," she said softly. "If you need me, I'm close." She stepped away, weaving through the narrow lane by the kitchen doors, the heat pressed against her like a hand on the back. A cook called for hands. A busboy hustled toward the dish pit with a tower of plates, steam curling off them. Lily handed off 2 coffees, adjusted the placement of a fork that had strayed half an inch, and crouched to pick up a linen that had slipped to the floor. There was choreography in the smallness. Catch, correct, continue. None of it earned applause, but all of it kept the room intact. When she returned with a water carafe, Nathan noticed the patch on her sleeve where the fabric had thinned. "Sir, would you like to start with a salad?" she asked. "That tomato basil you mentioned," he said. "And the roast chicken." "Of course." She wrote it down, then didn't trust the handwriting and rewrote it more clearly. "It comes with green beans. If you prefer mashed potatoes, I can ask." "Recipe beans are fine." Defended. "Very good." She gave a slight nod, an old-fashioned courtesy that felt like home. Nathan watched her cross to the POS screen, watched the way she shielded the order with her shoulder, as though she'd learned to make herself small in rooms that didn't always grant her space. He tried to see the evening through her eyes, the clock inching toward closing, the ache in the arches of her feet, the calculation that measured every table not by the price of the entree, but by the likelihood of a kind word at the end. His gaze drifted to the doors again. The kitchen exhaled butter and thyme, and, beneath it, the scorched note of a pan left a moment too long on heat. In that breath, Nathan felt the distance between who he was and how he appeared narrow to the span of a tabletop. He thought of the boy he'd been, taking late buses in from the edge of town, pockets light, back straight, trying to earn the right to be spoken to without the curl of a lip. Blindness? Lily had returned with a small dish of salt, replacing the shaker whose cap stuck. "This one pours easier," she said, almost apologetic, as if convenience were a favor too casual to mention. "Thank you," he said once more, and meant it like a handshake. She took a breath, as if storing that small exchange for later, something good to hold while waiting at a pharmacy line or watching a pot of soup in a kitchen with lights too bright. Her tray clinked faintly as she lifted it, the sound of glass on metal like a tiny bell. Then a shadow crossed the table. Harold Carter's profile cut clean lines under the dining room lights, hair parted sharp, tie pinned perfectly. His voice didn't rise so much as slice. "Hart," he said, not looking at Nathan, not bothering to lower his tone. "You have 3 open tickets, and your table at the window is still waiting on water. Move!" The room's murmur barely dipped, but Lily flinched as if a drawer had slammed. She steadied the tray and, before she turned, met Nathan's eyes for the briefest beat, no apology in them, only resolve. "Right away, Mr. Carter," she said, and the edges of her voice were ironed flat. The steak arrived on a tray balanced against Lily's hip, the juices still hissing from the grill. She set it down with practiced grace, yet her movements were measured, almost too careful. Nathan's eyes followed the way she bent slightly closer, the scent of rosemary and char rising between them. Her voice, hardly more than a thread, reached his ear as if carried on the steam of the dish. "Please, they're smuggling banned meat." The words were so fragile they might have vanished into the hum of silverware and low laughter if he hadn't been listening. His fork paused in midair. The room did not shift. Crystal glasses still caught the glow of chandeliers. Couples still clinked drinks in celebratory toasts. But at table 12, a fault line had opened. Lily straightened quickly, her expression smoothing into the polite mask of service. She slid a folded linen napkin toward him, her fingers trembling just enough to betray the urgency she had hidden in her voice. Her eyes, tired, shadowed, but fierce in their desperation, met his for a fraction of a second. That was the plea, silent, unmistakable. Nathan's pulse beat once, hard in his throat. Reports from Harold Carter had always been pristine, polished to the point of implausibility. Profit margins too clean, inspections without a single blemish. Nathan had chalked it up to ambition, to a manager eager to impress. But here, in the soft whisper of a waitress who had nothing to gain, he heard confirmation of the suspicion he had buried. Patriotism the napkin with deliberate slowness, as though merely adjusting the setting, and beneath it felt the faint stiffness of paper. He did not open it immediately. The gesture might draw eyes. Instead, he took his knife, sliced through the crust of seared beef, and held the blade suspended as though savoring the aroma. Inside, tension coiled tight. From across the dining room, Carter moved like a hawk, circling its territory. His tailored suit glistened slightly under the lights, his smile broad as he bent to shake a patron's hand. Yet his eyes flicked, brief, sharp, toward Lily. The glance was quick enough to escape most notice, but Nathan caught it. Carter was watching her. Lily refilled his water glass, her hand steady now in practiced defiance. "Is everything to your liking, sir?" she asked, her tone polite, rehearsed. "Yes," Nathan said, though his voice came out rougher than intended. He forced the knife downward, slicing cleanly through the steak, buying himself a moment. The meat bled juices onto porcelain, but he hardly noticed. His attention remained on the folded napkin resting innocently by his plate. Around them, the theater of dining continued. A man at the corner table laughed too loudly at his own joke. A woman in pearls dabbed at lipstick with her napkin. None of them knew that at table 12, a secret capable of shaking empires had just been placed in front of him. And he let his eyes wander the room as though idly curious. Carter had shifted closer, one hand resting on the back of a chair as he spoke to another guest. The laughter on his lips didn't reach his gaze. Nathan recognized that vigilance, the way predators mask themselves in charm. He cut another bite, lifted it halfway, then set the utensils down. His fingers brushed the napkin and drew it toward his lap. A quick movement, hidden beneath the tablecloth, unfolded the corner. Scrawled in hurried script were words that chilled him more than the whisper had. Ledger. Poisoning the supply chain. Don't trust the kitchen. Nathan's knife hovered again, frozen mid-air. The air around him seemed to thicken, each sound from the dining room muffled by the rush of blood in his ears. He thought of the name carved above the door, his name. The Gilded Oak was more than a restaurant. It was a symbol of the empire he had built, the promise of quality his fortune rested upon. And now a young woman in a worn uniform was telling him it was being corrupted from within. Lily withdrew silently, slipping between tables with the grace of someone accustomed to disappearing. Nathan's gaze followed her only a moment, then returned to the steak before him. The knife gleamed, catching the light, suspended as though the entire room waited for him to move. He forced his hand steady, lowered the blade, and reached discreetly into the inside pocket of his faded coat. His fingers closed around the cheap phone he carried on nights like this, the one unlinked to his name, to his empire, to the man the world believed he was. Beneath the hum of laughter and clinking glasses, Nathan drew the burner phone into his palm, the decision already taking shape behind his unreadable expression. The door of the little jazz bar sighed shut behind him, carrying in a smudge of rain and city grit. Inside, the room was the color of honey and old wood. A saxophone leaned on a stand near a low stage, its brass catching the lamplight, while a record spun a tune that sounded like midnight talking to itself. Nathan chose a back booth, where the leather had been softened by years of elbows and stories. He set his faded coat beside him, asked the bartender for a whiskey neat, and, when the glass arrived, dialed a number that almost no one knew. "Raymond," he said when the line clicked alive. "Are you well?" The voice on the other end was brisk, careful, like a man accustomed to putting out fires without letting anyone smell the smoke. "I'm fine." Nathan watched the record revolve, the slow orbit of the label. "I'm at one of ours, the Oak." A pause. "Working then?" "In a manner of speaking." He kept his voice even. "I received a message at the table, not a complaint, a warning." "I'm listening." "She says they're smuggling banned meat. She slipped me a note. Ledger, poisoning the supply chain, and something about not trusting the kitchen." On the line, paper rustled. Or maybe it was just the sound of Raymond's thought turning. From a guest? From a server, young, steady hands, tired eyes. Raymond exhaled slowly. For the record, Carter's last quarter was spotless. Inspections, suppliers, all tidy. "Too tidy," Nathan said. "You remember the Denver audit, the one we did after the headcount numbers bounced 3 ways? Or Phoenix, when we traced the linen invoices and found the little loop he'd drawn around a friend's shell company? This feels cousin to that, only darker." "I remember," Raymond said. "I also remember you going in without telling me until afterward." Flushed Nathan allowed himself a wry tilt of the mouth. "You slept better that way." Another pause, the record hissed softly between notes. The sax laying down a line so gentle it was almost a prayer. At the bar, an older couple argued kindly over a crossword clue and laughed when they both landed on the same answer. Nathan took a sip of whiskey. It tasted like oak and thyme. "What exactly do you want from me tonight?" Raymond asked. "Clarity," Nathan said, "and a pair of hands I can trust." "Send an internal team first thing," Raymond said, announced, with badges and clipboards. "We lock Carter's office, image the drives, pull purchase orders from the last year. If there's rot, we'll find it, and we'll do it above board." "You'll see them coming," Nathan replied, "and the rot will walk out in a banker's box before the first badge clears the lobby." "That's not fair. We've tightened procedures." "It's not about fairness," Nathan said gently. "It's about time." He let the silence hold a few beats. Somewhere, a glass clinked. Rain tapped at the front window like polite knuckles. In the old days, when his company fit in a borrowed conference room, he trusted reading the room more than reading a report. Those instincts had not paid him wrong then. They had not abandoned him now. The note said, "Ledger," he went on. "If there's a book, I want eyes on it, not a memo about it. I need to see the handwriting that bought the meat and moved the money. I need to see whether the pages smell like fear." "You're asking me to approve something I can't put on paper," Raymond said. "I'm asking you to remember who we are," Nathan answered. "We sell trust, food that won't shame your table, rooms that won't embarrass your name. If our promises are hollow, no compliance checklist will save us." Unleashed cleared his throat, the sound of a cautious man weighing both sides of a scale. "You understand the risks, chain of custody, legal exposure, your exposure. Understand that if you are recognized, we'll be answering a different set of questions at sunrise." States pants, the cities and you had. Seeks fence spence, not I Cernavi, just settering signed the tool. Not believe the brewer, and Jesus sweb eats settering and chinald. Seeks fence settering signed the tool. The only tool greenering will take their flit thee spooled in a shatter and the end of this. G's Jessenide, Jessettering signed the tool. Not I Cernavi, Jessettering in child. Seeks fence stittering system and it's settering signed the weather is believe. He had the plants is active and settering, it's settering signed the tool. Not I Cernavi, Jessettering signed the tool. On the 17 tool, Teeks fence bents, Jessettering signed the tool. Not I, Settering signed, Jessettering signed the tool. G's Teeks one. The only tool greenering, Siksvensettering signed to be the mall. Siksvensettering signed the tool. Not I Cernavi, Jess Settering signed the tool. The only tool greenering, said Settering, it's Settering, money fassery Facebook. Not believe the brewer, Siksven Spence is Settering signed the tool. Not the photo speeder of, die, and over. Siksven Spence, Teaksven Spence, the tool is believe. You takes fence, a con 8030. And more. The photo speeder of In Costumate, she'll need a cover, Nathan said. So will I. That's already in motion, Raymond replied, as if admitting he'd expected this call all along. I'll text you a location, 10 minutes to dress the part. Then she'll brief you. You're the lookout, Nathan. Let her be the hands. Agreed. Thanen, your pride. It tends to keep poor company after midnight. Notoriously let out a breath that might have been a laugh if the night were lighter. I'll bring my better angels, he said. They hung up. For a while he sat with the whiskey and the music, letting the saxophone thread through him. The bar smelled faintly of orange peel and old varnish. A ceiling fan pushed the air in lazy circles, the kind of motion you feel more than see. He thought of the boy he used to be in that Ohio diner, wiping counters twice so the shine looked honest, promising himself he'd never forget what it felt like to be invisible. Promises have a way of aging, he knew. You had to hold them up to the light now and then to be sure they were still the right shape. His phone buzzed once against the wood, a text with a street and a time. He finished the last sip, set the empty glass on its ring, and slid into his coat. The fabric had grown thin at the elbows, but it still knew how to carry a man through the weather. Yeah, Raymond's message glowed on the screen. Maggie Rowan, en route. She'll find you outside. The saxophone's final note hung like a promise as Nathan stood to meet the night. The dining room pulsed with its usual rhythm, plates lifted, glasses refilled, laughter swelling near the window tables. Lily tried to keep her steps measured, but when Carter's sharp voice cut through the noise, she froze. Office, now. Unreasonable word carried the weight of command. She set down her tray with mechanical precision, wiped her palms against the hem of her apron, and followed him down the narrow hall behind the kitchen. The smell of garlic butter gave way to something harsher. Cigarette smoke that clung to the plaster walls, stale and unyielding. Carter's office was small, cramped with filing cabinets and a desk too large for the space. The blinds were drawn, slats tilted just enough to let in a blade of streetlight. He shut the door with a click that felt louder than it should. The yellow glow of the desk lamp cast sharp shadows across his face, making his smile look thinner, his eyes colder. Sit, he said. Lily obeyed, her chair legs scraping the linoleum. Her chest rose and fell quickly, though she forced her hands to remain folded in her lap. Carter leaned back against the desk, arms crossed. You've been sloppy, again. And sloppy costs money. Her throat tightened. I've logged every order, every delivery. Save it. He had altered them before. $5,000, he said. That's what your mistake cost us. And since you don't have it, you'll be working it off. Quietly. Lily swallowed. The first time he'd done this, he'd cornered her with invoices that didn't match. He'd forced her to sign off on the difference, her name pinned like a thumbtack to his lies. Tonight the script was the same, but heavier. That isn't fair, she whispered. You know I don't. The sound without warmth. This isn't about fair. This is about survival. Mine, and, if you're smart, yours. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her apron. I can't cover $5,000. You know that. That's right, Carter said smoothly. He pushed off the desk, circling behind her chair. The stale scent of his cologne pressed close. Which means you'll keep doing exactly what I say. You'll keep signing what I put in front of you, and you'll keep your mouth shut. Because if you don't... He paused, savoring the silence. I make a phone call, and suddenly the pharmacy won't have the medication your brother needs. Strange how those things can get delayed. The words struck like ice water poured straight through her chest. She turned in her chair, eyes wide. "Leave Ethan out of this." Carter's smile thinned. "I'm just being practical. You want him to keep breathing comfortably, don't you? Then you'll keep doing your part. Don't think of it as blackmail. Think of it as insurance." Her nails pressed half-moons into her palms, but she didn't let the tears rise. She wouldn't give him that. "You're cruel." "I'm realistic." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "And let me be clear. No one in this building will believe you. To them, you're just the girl who makes mistakes. To me, you're useful, but only if you stay quiet." The desk lamp hummed faintly, the only sound in the cramped room. Lily wanted to scream, to throw the papers back in his face, but Ethan's name pulsed in her head like a warning bell. She pictured him coughing, clutching the inhaler, and the anger melted into cold helplessness. "Now," Carter said, straightening, smoothing his tie as though he had simply discussed scheduling, "get back out there, smile for the guests, and remember, you owe me." Her legs felt unsteady as she stood. She opened the door carefully, as if the hallway beyond might collapse under her weight. The noise of the restaurant returned in a rush, cutlery striking china, conversations flowing, none of it aware of the trap she carried inside her chest. She walked back toward the dining room, her face arranged into the neutral smile that was expected. But behind her eyes burned something sharper than fear. Carter thought he had taken her last weapon, thought her brother's illness chained her into silence. He was wrong. Nier. Because in the corner of the dining room at table 12 sat the man in the faded coat who had listened, really listened, when she whispered the truth. Lily stepped back onto the floor with tears pressed hard behind her eyes. Her heart set on one decision. She would put her trust in Nathan Cole, no matter the cost. The parking lot behind the jazz bar was nearly empty, just a patch of cracked asphalt glistening under a weak street lamp. Wind swept across it, carrying with it the smell of wet concrete and the far-off hiss of traffic on the avenue. Nathan stood with his coat collar turned up, the whiskey's warmth fading against the chill. A set of footsteps approached, measured, purposeful. Out of the shadows walked a woman in her 40s, trim, dressed in dark jeans and a jacket zipped high. Her stride was confident, her expression unreadable. She stopped a few paces from him and let her gaze settle, assessing without a word. "You Nathan Cole," she said finally, her voice low, steady, and faintly amused. "You hide well, but not from me." He studied her with equal measure. Her features were sharp, her eyes like pale stone. "Maggie Rowan," he said. Raymond spoke highly. "He'd better. I've saved him from himself more than once." A flicker of a smile tugged at her mouth before it vanished. She reached into a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a neatly folded gray jumpsuit. "Here. Tonight you're not a billionaire. You're maintenance staff." Nathan took the uniform, holding it awkwardly, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar. Maggie handed him a laminated badge with the logo of Sparkle Clean, the company contracted for overnight cleaning. The photo on it bore his face, altered just enough to look like a man no one would remember. "Your name is Mike," she said. "Nobody asks questions at 3 in the morning if you look like you know how to mop. Stay quiet. Stay in character." The badge, then back at her. "Mike," he repeated. "Does Mike know how to use a mop?" That earned a real smile, brief but genuine. "He better learn quickly." She pulled a long-handled mop from the bag and placed it in his hands. He held it like it might break. The bristles scraped against the pavement as he tried to adjust the angle, his grip clumsy. Maggie shook her head with a sigh that bordered on laughter. "You've commanded boardrooms, but this—" She reached out, straightened his hands. "Left higher, right lower. It's not complicated. Just try not to stab anyone with it." Nathan attempted a tentative swipe across the asphalt. The mop swayed unsteadily, splattering droplets of leftover rain onto his shoes. He looked down at the mess and raised his brow. "I suppose I'll need more practice." "By the end of tonight, you'll look like you've done this for years," Maggie said, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. That's the point. We'll be inside with the rest of the crew, invisible. While I work on Carter's office, you keep watch. Any sign of trouble, one tap on your earpiece. No heroics." The seriousness in her voice tightened the air again. Nathan nodded. "Understood." "Good." She zipped the duffel shut. "Timing matters. Staff will clear out by 1. We'll enter with the cleaners and have 3 hours before the morning prep crew arrives. The safe in Carter's office won't open itself." Tucked the mop under his arm like a soldier with an ill-fitting weapon. He looked past Maggie to the silhouette of the city rising against the night sky, his thoughts circling the young waitress who had risked everything with a whisper. Her courage demanded more than polite acknowledgement. It demanded proof. Her jacket tighter against the wind, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. 3 in the morning, she said, eyes fixed on him. "That's when you'll see the truth for yourself." Nathan tightened his grip on the mop, the absurdity of it almost making him laugh, but Maggie's words lingered in the cold air. 3 in the morning, he would see the truth. The rear service door of the Gilded Oak closed behind them with a hushed clang, muffled by the steady drone of an exhaust fan somewhere overhead. The restaurant that only hours earlier had glimmered with laughter and candlelight now lay in silence. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and roasted meat gone cold, a strange marriage of purity and decay. Nathan adjusted the stiff collar of his gray janitor's jumpsuit, his mop bucket rolling softly along the tiles. Maggie moved ahead of him, her stride purposeful, her eyes scanning each camera tucked into the corners. With a flick of her wrist, a handheld device hummed to life, scrambling the feed for just long enough to make them shadows. "Keep walking like you belong," she murmured without looking back. Nathan gripped the mop handle and tried to mimic her ease, but the bristles squeaked against the floor in protest. The sound seemed enormous in the stillness. Maggie shot him a glance over her shoulder, half warning, half smirk, and then pressed forward. They turned a corner, the dim bulbs buzzing faintly above them. Carter's office was just ahead, the door marked only by a tarnished brass plaque. Nathan paused outside, listening. The building creaked softly, pipes settling in the ceiling. Beyond that, nothing. Maggie knelt by the lock. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, pulling a small kit from her pocket. Within seconds, the tumblers clicked open. She pushed the door gently inward and stepped aside for Nathan to follow. The office smelled of stale smoke and ambition gone sour. Papers cluttered the desk, invoices stacked too neatly to be genuine. On the wall hung photographs of Carter with city officials, a golf trophy, and one framed image of a Little League team. Nathan's gaze lingered on it, the one Raymond had mentioned. Carter, younger and leaner, grinning with his arms slung over children who likely remembered him far less fondly. "Help me with this," Maggie whispered. She tugged the frame loose. Behind it, set into the drywall, was a square safe. Nathan's pulse quickened. He steadied the frame while Maggie pressed a slim keypad reader against the lock. The device beeped softly, failing once, then twice. Maggie narrowed her eyes. "Try the trophy year," Nathan said quietly, nodding at the photo. She entered the digits. There was a pause, then a satisfying thunk. The safe door eased open. Inside, bundles of cash were stacked like bricks. A passport lay tucked in a manila envelope. But it was the small, leather-bound book, black and scuffed with use, that held their attention. Maggie lifted it carefully, as though it were warm to the touch. She opened to the first page. The handwriting was tight, deliberate. Columns of dates, names of suppliers, numbers that did not match the official ledgers. The deeper she turned, the darker the entries became. Meat shipments tied to companies that no longer existed, payments funneled through shell accounts. At the margin of one page, a single note stood out. Westland stock, cheap, off-market, keep quiet. Nathan felt his chest tighten. He had seen Westland meats shuttered by regulators, condemned for contamination, and now its ghost had found life in his restaurant. Whispered, she pulled a slim pen camera from her pocket and began photographing page after page. Each flashless click was another nail in Carter's coffin. Nufus keened closer, tracing a line of ink with his eyes. It wasn't just theft, it was a system. Entire supply chains twisted to hide poison behind polished menus. He thought of Lily's trembling voice, of her brother's fragile health, and realized her warning was the thin thread that had kept hundreds, maybe thousands, from dining on danger. Maggie finished the last page and closed the book. She slid it back into the safe, stacking the cash exactly as they'd found it. She reset the frame on the wall, her movements neat, disciplined, leaving no trace. Nathan adjusted his mop bucket, his heart hammering in his ribs. For the first time, he felt the weight of the conspiracy pressing against him like a tide. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself when 8:63. A sound cut through the silence, demolished the faint creak of a footstep in the hall. Both of them froze. The ledger sat back in its place, but the air around them suddenly felt charged. Maggie's eyes flicked to Nathan, her finger pressed to her lips. Another sound followed, the rattle of keys, closer this time. Nedge as Maggie reached for the light switch to plunge the room into darkness. The office door handle began to turn, and the quiet safety of their mission shattered into raw suspense. The night air clung to Nathan's coat as he and Maggie slipped back into the alley, the service door closing with a muted thud behind them. Neither spoke at first. Their breaths came sharp, the adrenaline still pulsing from the narrow escape. Nathan's heartbeat thudded against his ribs, loud as the echo of their hurried steps across the cracked pavement. Only when they reached the black sedan parked beneath the dying glow of a street lamp did they allow themselves to pause. Maggie pressed her back against the car, arms crossed, eyes still sharp as though expecting shadows to move. Nathan leaned heavily against the trunk, exhaling a long, uneven breath. His hands still trembled faintly, and for a fleeting second he thought of how Lily's hands had trembled the same way when she placed that folded napkin on his table. Her fear had been palpable, but so had her courage. She was right, Nathan murmured, half to himself, every word of it. Maggie glanced at him. And now you have proof. She tapped the duffel bag with the hidden camera pen inside, enough to burn Carter's entire scheme to the ground. The horizon had begun to shift, a faint band of gray-blue stretching across the city skyline. Chicago's glass towers reflected the first fragile hints of morning, turning their surfaces into slivers of light. The contrast struck Nathan. While the city prepared for another ordinary day, he stood at the cusp of a storm about to break. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered quickly, the small screen illuminating Raymond Hale's face. Raymond looked composed, as always, though behind the glasses, there was a tightness to his expression. "Nee?" Raymond asked without preamble. Nathan nodded. "Ledger? Invoices? Off-book accounts? Maggie got everything. Westland meats, poison running straight through my supply chain." Raymond's brows drew together. He exhaled slowly, adjusting his glasses. "I've reviewed the files Maggie uploaded. It's worse than we expected. He wasn't just skimming profits, Nathan. He was laundering money for outside players. That ledger ties him directly to criminal networks." The words sat heavy between them. Nathan straightened, his jaw tight. "And every customer who walked into that restaurant unknowingly paid for it. My name is stamped on every receipt." "Then we move carefully," Raymond said. "I can have the legal team—" "No." Nathan's tone cut across the line, steady and absolute. "This isn't paperwork. This isn't lawyers exchanging letters. It's rot inside my own house, and I won't let Carter spin it into another lie. I need to look him in the eye. Today." Raymond studied him through the screen, silent for a long beat. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Then I'll make the calls. Federal authorities will stand by. But Nathan, tread carefully. Your presence could set everything aflame." "Sometimes fire is the only way to cleanse," Nathan replied. The call ended, the phone going dark in his hand. Maggie studied him in the dim light of dawn. "You're really going back there this morning? Walking in as yourself?" Nathan's gaze swept the skyline again, catching more of the rising sun. He felt the resolve settle inside him like stone. Yes, I've hidden long enough. Carter needs to know exactly who was sitting at table 12. Maggie's lips curved in the faintest suggestion of approval. Then I'll be at your side. The city around them stirred to life. Delivery trucks rumbled along side streets, early commuters shuffled across crosswalks, and the faint smell of roasted coffee drifted from a corner cafe. Amid the ordinary rhythms of morning, Nathan felt the extraordinary weight of what lay ahead. The ledger had given him evidence, but Lily Hart had given him something far rarer: faith. Her whisper had been a gamble, a desperate reaching toward hope. He would not betray that trust. Prominence pulled away from the curb, the sun finally cleared the horizon, spilling golden light down the avenues. The day had begun, but for Nathan it carried the gravity of judgment. In the quiet of the Gilded Oak, Lily tied her apron strings and straightened a stack of menus, unaware that the storm she had unleashed was about to come crashing through the front doors. The late morning sun caught the tall windows of the Gilded Oak, washing the polished brass handles and white stone facade in brilliance. Inside, servers hurried to reset tables, arranging wine glasses just so, rehearsing the careful choreography that made the lunch rush feel effortless. A hum of anticipation filled the air. The staff had been told a special guest was arriving, someone Carter insisted would elevate the restaurant's reputation even further. Then, without warning, the steady rumble of two black SUVs drew attention to the curb. Their doors opened in crisp succession, and the sight of sharply dressed men stepping out caught the eyes of every passerby. Conversation in the dining room faltered, then quieted altogether as the main doors swung wide. Nathan Cole entered. He was no longer the tan work-worn shoes. Today he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, its lines sharp against the gleam of his polished shoes. His presence carried weight, the sort that made people instinctively part like water around a prow. Behind him, Raymond Hale followed, calm and steady, while two men in dark suits lingered near the door with discreet vigilance. The hostess froze, her lips parted in shock, though she quickly tried to compose herself. "Mr. Cole, welcome." The words trembled out, half question, half prayer. Across the room, Carter emerged from his office, his practiced grin already spreading. He had expected a celebrity, perhaps a politician, someone who would flatter his standing. But when he saw Nathan striding toward him, his feet seemed to stick to the floor. His smile faltered, then collapsed. "Nathan, Mr. Cole," Carter stammered, his voice far too loud in the suddenly hushed restaurant. "What an honor, if only I'd known." Nathan didn't pause to acknowledge him. He passed Carter without breaking stride, every step deliberate. The staff exchanged glances, unsure whether to bow their heads or simply move aside. At table 12, near the kitchen doors, Nathan stopped. The same wobbly table where he had sat in his disguise the night before waited unoccupied. He rested a hand on the chair back, turned, and let his voice carry. "Last night," he said, each syllable crisp, unhurried, "I sat right here." Across the dining room, like a stone dropped into still water. Servers froze mid-step. Diners leaned in, forks suspended. From behind the bar, Douglas Reed, a longtime patron and old friend of the Cole family, raised his brows in astonishment. His napkin slipped from his hand, forgotten. Carter's face drained of color. His gaze darted between the table, Nathan, and the silent crowd of witnesses. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The practiced ease, the oily charm, both had deserted him. Nathan's expression didn't soften. He drew the chair back and sat, as if reclaiming the space where truth had first cracked open. His steady eyes never left Carter's. Carter's legs felt weak beneath him, his palms damp. As murmurs swelled around the dining room, he looked wildly from one face to another and finally realized every person here now understood the truth, and there would be no turning back. The dining room of the Gilded Oak fell into a strange stillness, as though even the clink of cutlery dared not intrude. Sunlight poured through tall windows, flooding the room in golden brightness. Yet the air was taut with unease. Every server, every diner, every set of eyes turned toward Nathan Cole as he stood near table 12. "I am the owner of this house," Nathan said evenly, his voice carrying across the hushed space. "And today I demand honesty." Gasps broke the silence, a murmur rippling among the guests. Carter stepped forward quickly, his smile thin, his words hurried. "Mr. Cole, surely this isn't the place." Prohibit's gaze cut through him, silencing him without raising his voice. Then he turned, his eyes resting on Lily Hart. She stood near the bar with a tray clutched to her chest, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Someone," Nathan said, calm yet resolute, "was brave enough to tell me the truth last night. Who was it?" His words rang like a bell. Nia Carter's jaw tightened. A flicker of fear shadowed his face. One of the younger servers lowered his eyes to the floor, unable to meet Nathan's stare, the gesture betraying silent knowledge. All around, the weight of expectation pressed down. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers shook against the tray. She felt Carter's stare burning into her back and Nathan's unwavering eyes pulling her forward. The truth hovered between them, fragile and unavoidable. Lily's lips parted, her voice lost in the storm of her racing heart, her hands trembling so violently she almost dropped the tray, yet no answer escaped, leaving the room suspended in a breathless pause. The narrow office behind the dining room felt smaller than ever, its blinds half drawn, the smell of stale smoke clinging to the carpet. Carter stood stiffly by his desk, sweat already dampening his collar. Nathan entered first, his calm presence filling the space, followed by Raymond, who carried a slim folder tucked neatly under his arm. Without a word, Raymond opened the file and spread its contents across the desk. Scanned invoices, false supplier names, inflated numbers, all cross-referenced against the black ledger. Each page was a nail in the coffin. "We traced the money," Raymond said quietly, "and it all leads back to you." Twisted into a forced grin. "These are clerical errors, misunderstandings." As Raymond pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen, a video flickered to life. Carter leaning close to Lily in this very office, his voice low and threatening, his face cruel. "You'll do what I say, or your brother pays the price." Unborn into the room, froze at the sight. Her body trembled as the echo of his voice filled the silence. She covered her mouth, eyes wide, unable to hold back the flood of emotion. New with tears streaming down her face, Lily turned to Nathan, her voice breaking as she confessed. "It was me. I told you everything." Lily stood in the center of Carter's office, her hands trembling as she wiped at her cheeks, but her voice, once faltering, began to steady with each word. The doorway behind her was cracked open, and the faint shadows of curious employees loomed in the hall, straining to hear. "I never stole anything," she said, her gaze fixed on Nathan though her voice carried through the room. "Carter made up a debt, $5,000. He said I owed it. He told me if I didn't obey, I'd lose my job. And without this job, Ethan—" Her voice cracked again, but she pressed forward. "My brother needs constant care. He used Ethan's sickness as leverage. He knew I'd do anything to keep him alive." Nathan's face hardened, each word weighing on him like a blow. He looked squarely at Carter, his tone low and icy. "You used the illness of a child as a bargaining chip. There is no lower ground than that." Carter shifted uncomfortably, his face pale, lips twisting in denial, but the evidence already spoke louder than he could. Lily's truth, raw and unvarnished, had broken whatever wall of lies he had built. Her tears streamed freely now, but she stood straighter, unburdened at last. Nathan placed a hand gently on the desk, steady and unyielding, his silent promise of protection echoing in the heavy stillness. A sharp knock rattled the office door. When it swung open, two uniformed Chicago police officers stepped inside, their presence final and unignorable. The restaurant, once alive with the clatter of plates and hum of chatter, fell into a silence so deep it seemed even the chandeliers held their breath. Two uniformed officers stepped forward, one unfolding a folded sheet of paper. His voice rang clear, official, unshakable. "Harold Carter, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, and endangerment." Gasps rippled. Diners craned their necks, stunned to see the spectacle unfold in a place they associated with refinement. Carter's face flushed crimson. "This is absurd," he shouted, his hands waving wildly as though sheer denial could wipe away the damning evidence. "I built this restaurant's success. I'm the reason these people have jobs." This mince, the ledger, and the video still displayed on the tablet said otherwise. The officers stepped closer, their movements steady and unhurried. As the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the reality settled in. A man who had barked orders with such smug certainty now stood shackled, trembling, and small. TAF members spoke up for him. Heads bowed, eyes turned away, the silence heavier than any jeer. The humiliation was complete, every ounce of his false dignity stripped bare before the very people he had ruled through fear. As Carter was led out through the front doors, the murmurs of the guests grew louder, a mixture of shock and reluctant relief. The empire of deceit had crumbled at last. Nathan turned back to Lily, his voice steady but gentle, carrying through the charged stillness. "From this moment on, no one will ever dare threaten you again." Lily stepped out onto the sidewalk, the heavy door of the gilded oak closing behind her. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean and bright. Sunlight spilled onto the wet pavement, throwing glints of gold across puddles. She wiped her cheeks, though fresh tears still came, her chest rising and falling with the weight of release. Nathan followed at a measured pace, his dark suit striking against the gleam of the morning. For a moment, he stood beside her in silence, letting the sounds of the city carry around them. Then, in a voice steady and low, he said, "Thank you, Lily, for your honesty, for your courage." She turned to him, startled. Gratitude from a man like him, wealthy, powerful, someone whose name was whispered with reverence in boardrooms, was something she had never imagined. You're thanking me?" she whispered, almost unable to believe. Nathan's expression softened. "The false debt Carter invented has been erased, and more than that, arrangements are being made. Ethan will have the care he needs. No more fear hanging over your family." Her breath caught. For years she had carried the burden alone, watching her brother in sterile hospital rooms, wondering if each bill would be the one she could no longer pay. The memory of Ethan's frail smile, the way he once told her not to worry while hooked to tubes, came rushing back, breaking whatever walls she had left. She pressed her hand to her lips, trembling as relief and disbelief mingled. Then, through her tears, she looked at Nathan, voice barely audible. "Why?" she asked, her words quivering like glass. "Why did you believe me?" The boardroom on the top floor of Cole Holdings was nothing like the warm light of the restaurant Lily once knew. Here, sunlight spilled through tall windows, painting the polished wood table in pale gold. Chicago stretched endlessly beyond the glass, its towers and streets shimmering with late-morning energy. Nathan sat at the head of the table, calm but purposeful. Raymond was to his right, flipping through notes. Maggie leaned casually in her chair, her sharp eyes betraying nothing. Lily stood near the end of the table, uncertain, her plain dress and worn shoes out of place against the grandeur of the room. Nathan cleared his throat. "There's something important we need to address," he began. His gaze settled on Lily. "This company has grown vast, but growth means nothing if we lose sight of the people who keep it alive. Integrity must be more than a word on paper." Copia, he gestured toward her with quiet authority. "That's why I've decided Lily Hart will step into a new position, manager of ethics and employee welfare for Cole Holdings. Lily blinked, stunned. Her lips parted, but no words came. "Me?" she finally stammered. I serve tables. I don't know how to—" Raymond Meist offered a reassuring smile. "Courage and truth are qualifications no resume can match." Maggie gave the faintest nod of agreement, her approval more valuable than a dozen endorsements. Lily's heart raced. Just days ago, she had been a cornered waitress, trapped under Carter's threats. Now she was being asked to safeguard the well-being of thousands. She shook her head softly, almost in disbelief. "I don't understand why—" Nathan leaned forward, his expression gentle but firm. "Because my company needs someone exactly like you." The little apartment smelled of cinnamon and butter. Lily had placed a checkered cloth over the small dining table, and the glow of a single lamp warmed the room. Eater and his color brighter than it had been in months, set out mismatched plates with the pride only a younger brother could muster. On the counter, Mrs. Joanne Miller arrived carrying her famous apple pie, its crust golden and fragrant. Soft jazz floated from the old radio in the corner, filling the silence between gentle conversation. Lily looked different now, her posture straighter, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear. She was learning her new role with care, and tonight, for the first time, she allowed herself to enjoy the peace that had come after the storm. Nathan joined them at the table, his presence unassuming but steady. Ethan leaned forward, his voice clear and heartfelt. "Thank you, sir, for giving my sister her life back, and mine too." Nathan's gaze softened as he cut a small piece of pie. "Sometimes," he said, "the one who saves an empire isn't the man in the tall office, but the person who wore shoes worn thin and still kept walking." The words lingered in themselves into memory. Lily reached for Ethan's hand across the table, her smile filled with hope and strength. The evening ended not with tension, but with the soft glow of golden light over their simple meal, a light that promised it would remain. In the end, Nathan's empire was not saved by money, lawyers, or polished boardrooms. It was saved by the quiet courage of a young woman who refused to let fear dictate her choices. Lily's worn shoes and trembling hands carried more strength than Carter's greed ever could. Her honesty became the turning point, reminding us that true integrity often comes from those who have the least, yet give the most. Slaughtered it, no. How many Lilies are around us every day, people who silently endure, yet hold the power to change the world with a single act of bravery. As one old saying goes, the greatest wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you give away with courage. If this story made you reflect, drop a 1 in the comments. Which state are you watching from? Share it below. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one.